A little boy sells his only toy car at a flea market to buy medicine for his sick mom, and a billionaire CEO happens to pass by. To notice him, what he does next leaves the boy and his mom in total amazement. Before we begin, let us know in the share where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to like this video to support the channel. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Owen held the small chip toy car in his hands, running his thumb over its surface with a sense of wonder. Once bright red paint has beautifully softened over the years, a testament to the love and adventures it has experienced. His favorite for as long as he could remember, a wonderful gift from his mom on his 4th birthday. Back then, she had been. Her laughter filled their tiny apartment like sunlight spilling through the curtains, bringing warmth and joy, even as things had changed now. Her laughter was a precious gem, occasionally replaced by tired smiles and soft sighs when she thought he wasn't looking. The doctors had given. She received a prescription, but the cost of the medicine was higher than expected. Owen had overheard her chatting with the pharmacist. Her voice was a bit strained, and her hands gripped the counter as she inquired about a cheaper option. Unfortunately, there wasn't one. So here he was, stood at the flea market beneath the shade of an old canopy, holding his toy with a sense of wonder as if it were the most precious treasure in the world, because to him it had always been. But now there's a new perspective on things. His mom needed that medicine, and he had taken his tiny collection of toys and placed them neatly on an old crate, ready for a new adventure. It was evident what the true treasure was, the car his mom had advised him to stay with home while she rested, but Owen was determined to take action and not just sit around. Watch her face challenges as people passed by, some barely glancing in her direction, while others giving him a quick smile before moving on. His heart sank with each person that walked past without stopping. He tried, calling out his small voice amidst the lively chatter of the market, to share a car for sale. A man with a scruffy beard paused to admire the items, shaking his head with a smile. "How much for the car, kid?" Owen straightened. $10, and the man let out a low whistle. "That's impressive." Owen emphasized the significance of the toy car, noting its steep price with a serious tone. "It's my best one." The man hesitated, then sighed. "Sorry, kid, can't do 10, he said as he walked away, leaving Owen gripping the toy even tighter as the minutes passed and the sun shone brightly. As the heat increased, Owen felt a flutter of concern in his stomach. What if everyone was just waiting for him? Bought it. And what if he had to go home with something special? The thought filled him with excitement. As he tightened, a shadow gracefully fell over him. Owen looked up to see a tall man in a sleek outfit. A gray suit stood in front of him, exuding a presence that effortlessly encouraged people to step aside. With a charming smile, his dark hair was neatly styled, and he held a cup of coffee in one hand while scrolling through his phone with the other, but something made him pause. Perhaps it was the way Owen stood there, determined and full of potential. Small, or the way his tiny hands held the car as if it were a lifeline. Whatever. The man put his phone away and crouched down to eye level. "What are you selling?" Owen straightened his heart. Gently holding my car, he examined it with a sense of awe and appreciation. Bright blue eyes darting between the toy and Owen's face, reflecting the anticipation of Owen's hesitation. If he lowers the price, perhaps this man will choose to stay, unlike the others, and that would be a wonderful outcome. He really needed the $10, he said with determination. The man raised an eyebrow at that. "It must be one special car." Owen nodded. "And it truly is. My mom needs medicine, and we're on our way to get it. There isn't quite enough money." The words were simple, spoken with a sense of acceptance, but they carried a weight in them. The air between them was charged, and the man's expression changed just a bit, a hint of something intriguing passing across his face as he glanced. He looked down at the car again, then at Owen, and reached into his jacket pocket. "I'll take it." He said. Owen's breath caught. "Truly." The man nodded, and instead of pulling out his wallet, he took out a slim checkbook. He wrote something down and tore it out with a smile. Out came the check, and it was handed to Owen along with the car. Owen blinked in surprise. Surprised he had hoped for a few crumpled bills, maybe even a $10 bill if fortune smiled upon him. But when he looked down, his breath hitched. $10,000. His fingers danced with excitement as he gazed at the number. Feeling a sense of wonder at the sight of so many zeros gathered together, his stomach fluttered with excitement and for the first time since coming to the market, he felt a wave of emotion welling up. and he swallowed hard against the feelings that surged within him. "This is a lot," he whispered. The man's voice was steady yet resolute. "It's just right." What it's worth. Owen was at a loss for words. He felt a flutter in his heart. Burst out of his chest. "Thank you." He breathed. "Thank you so much." The man gave a small nod. "What's your name, kid?" "Owen." "Well, Owen, you take that check to your mom." "Okay." Owen held it close, as if worried it might vanish. "I will." The man, after a brief moment of hesitation, he stood up and playfully ruffled Owen's hair, encouraging him to take care of her, turned and walked away, blending into the crowd before Owen could even ask his name. Owen didn't waste another second. He eagerly grabbed his other toys, stuffed them into his backpack, and dashed all the way home, his small legs pumping with excitement. When he burst through the apartment door, panting and flushed, Emily sat up from the couch, startled. "Olin, what? Where have you been?" He practically flew into her arms, thrusting the check into her hands. "Mom, we can buy the medicine." Emily took the paper, her brow furrowed in confusion, but when she realized the possibilities, a spark of excitement lit up her face. She saw the amount and gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Owen, where did you?" "Guess what? I sold my car," she said simply, and tears of joy welled in her eyes as she pulled, holding him close, so tightly that he could barely breathe. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice full of feeling. "You didn't have to do that, but I wanted," he said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "I just want you to be okay." She pulled back, looking at him with so much love it filled his heart with warmth. "I am okay, Owen. Having you that night brought such warmth." As he lay in bed, filled with thoughts about the man at the market, the man who had given him so much more than just money, he had inspired him, and Owen felt a strong sense that he would see him again. Emily sat at the kitchen table long after Owen had fallen asleep. She stared at the check, believing it held the promise of something wonderful that could brighten her future. $10,000 was a number that once seemed out of reach, yet here it was, real and solid in her hands. Trembling fingers, she should have been thrilled, but a lingering doubt nestled deep in her chest. Who was this man? It was intriguing that a stranger would give such an extravagant amount for a toy car. It sparked curiosity and wonder, making one think about the possibilities. About it did, but then she glanced at Owen, his small body snugly curled under the blankets, breathing softly, and she felt a sense of wonder, knowing she couldn't afford to question a miracle. The next morning, she made the call, and the pharmacy confirmed that the prescription was ready. Within hours, she was all set for the first time. As the months passed, Emily held the medicine in her hands, and a wave of relief washed over her, ways she hadn't felt in years. She had finally let go of the weight of worry and embraced her true strength. For Owen, but now for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that things might improve, and they did. The improvement was evident. It wasn't immediate, but it was a steady improvement. Within a week, her energy began to return, and the constant ache in her bones started to ease. The exhaust that had once weighed her down like quicksand started to lift, and she found herself no longer needing to sit down after. Climbing the stairs brought a sense of joy as Owen reached for her hand, and her laughter blossomed, genuine and bright, filled their small apartment with warmth once more as her strength returned. So did her determination. Wasn't the kind of person who could accept a gift like this without feeling inspired to give something back. The first thing she did was call every place she had previously applied to, and this time, with a fresh sense of enthusiasm, she secured I had a job at a small design firm that may not have been glamorous, but it was a unique experience filled with opportunities for growth. Paying, and it was stable. Stability was even more than she had dared to dream of. Owen beamed when she told him. "That's awesome, Mom," he said, his brown eyes sparkling, shining with pride. "Now we can look forward without any worries, right?" Emily brushed his hair back and kissed his forehead, saying, "Right, baby." But even as she spoke, her thoughts floated back to the man at the flea market, the one who had made all of this possible. Who was he? Would she ever? James Reeves couldn't shake the thought of the little boy from his mind. It all began with a simple act of a child standing in the middle of a flea market enthusiastically selling a toy car had caught his attention, and now, days later, he found himself reflecting on that moment more often than he expected, even though he hadn't bought the toy for himself. The money, $10,000, was insignificant to him. Yet the boy's sincerity had stirred something within. Something deep inside him. There had been a hopeful kind of yearning in the kid's voice, not for himself but for his mother. Was a delightful sight for James. It was something he had never encountered before, had ever experienced. He had grown up in wealth, surrounded by privilege. Yet there was something remarkable about that. A little boy had shown more strength than many of the executives James worked with, and now he found himself pondering. If the mother had truly utilized the money, it could have made a positive difference. Was she better off, James? He found himself drawn to the unfamiliar, and one evening, something special unfolded. After work, he asked his driver to take a detour. The address on the check was simply for verification purposes, nothing more. He had memorized it effortlessly. And locating the building was a breeze, a charming apartment complex nestled between other structures. As the car approached the edges of the city, he paused for a moment, feeling a sense of anticipation despite having no real reason to hesitate. What was he going to do? Knock on the door and announce himself? That sounds like an exciting opportunity. Before he could change his mind, something near the entrance caught his eye. A woman and a small boy were stepping out, the child tugging on her hand. His laughter ringing with a sense of joy. James recognized the tousled brown hair and the same spark of determination in his eyes. It was him, but it wasn't just the boy that made James pause. It was the mother, Emily. She was so different from what he had envisioned. She had a unique strength, even in her exhaustion, much like Owen had described her. But the woman in front of him was absolutely radiant. She still had a slight. There was a delicate quality to her frame, suggesting a journey of recovery, yet her cheeks held a vibrant hue, radiating a lively spirit, an expression that had never existed before. She was beautiful in an effortless way that created something special. Before he could stop it, a shift occurred in his chest. James wasn't a man who second-guessed himself, but in that moment, he found himself doing just that. Intended to check and to satisfy his curiosity, but now enjoying the sight of her laughter as she knelt to tie Owen's shoe, and in that moment, he felt a mix of emotions, as if he were stepping into a new experience. Owen noticed him, and the little boy's eyes lit up with excitement before James could even think. Owen broke into a run, his small legs carrying him across the pavement. "Hey," he called out, waving his arms, "it's you." Emily turned at the sound of Owen's voice, her brows lifting in surprise. Pausing in surprise as she followed his gaze, her eyes landed on James and she stood still. For a moment, everyone paused. And then James took a step forward, filled with curiosity about what lay ahead. Before he could say anything, Owen excitedly blurted out, "Mom, this is the guy. One who bought my car." Emily felt a rush of excitement as James extended his hand. The corner of his mouth tilting slightly, James Reeves' Emily paused with a sense of anticipation before shaking it, her fingers warm against his. Emily Harper had an intriguing quality about her. Her eyes sparkled when she looked at him, filled with a sense of gratitude, and for the first time in a long while, James felt a renewed sense of hope. Owen, unaware of the unspoken tension, beamed up at him with a bright grin. "You came to check on us, huh?" James hesitated before nodding. "I guess I did." Emily's lips parted in surprise, and for a moment, he thought she might tell him to leave. But then, slowly, she smiled. "Would you like to come in?" James wasn't sure why he said yes. But as he followed them inside, he had a sense that this was just the start. Emily had always been a firm believer in repaying kindness. She always found a way to stay true to her values, no matter the challenges life presented. "I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet, embracing my pride and dignity, and showing what I could achieve. Herself and the world that she could stand on her own 2 feet, and here she was, standing outside the glass building of Reeves Enterprises with an envelope in her hands, filled with a sense of anticipation about the possibilities ahead. It had been 2 weeks since James Reeves had walked into her life, and in that time, everything had transformed with the medicine, had done its job, and every day she felt stronger, more like herself. She had started her new job at the design firm, and for the first time in years, she had enough to pay rent with confidence. There'd be anything left for groceries, but no matter how much better things got, one thing remained in the back of her mind. Be aware of the $10,000. It was a generous gift, but it didn't quite resonate with her as she hadn't earned it, and she felt a sense of purpose knowing that there was still an opportunity to address the situation. even if James had never referred to it in that way. She approached the situation as she always did, facing it head-on with determination and taking a deep breath. She stepped through the building's entrance. The air inside was cool and sterile, a refreshing contrast to the warmth of her small apartment. She walked up to the front desk with a sense of determination. Feeling a bit out of place in her second-hand blazer and thrift store shoes, the receptionist offered a brief glance upward. "I'm here to see James," she said with a hopeful smile. "Reeves," Emily said, striving to maintain her composure. The woman offered her a curious glance. "Do you have an appointment?" Emily acknowledged the change. The envelope in her hands, "And I just need 5 minutes of his time." The receptionist let out a gentle sigh, as if she was familiar with that request from Mr. countless times before. Reeves is always prepared and prefers to stick to his schedule, ensuring everything runs smoothly before Emily has a chance to reply. A voice cut through the air, and it was reassuring. "It's fine, Angela. Let her through." She turned to see. James stood a few feet away, his sharp blue eyes locked onto hers, filled with promise. Dressed in another expensive suit, radiating the same effortless confidence as the first time they had met. But there was something else now, something gentler. Emily swallowed, feeling the lightness of. He tilted his head toward the elevators, offering a silent invitation. With a quiet determination, she followed him into his office, which was impressively spacious and adorned with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. SC skyline was the kind of space that made her feel even smaller than she already did, but she was determined not to let it affect her. With determination, she placed the envelope on his desk before he could even take a seat. "This is for you," she said confidently. James raised an eyebrow, leaning against the edge of his desk, curious about what was happening. "Exactly." Emily lifted her chin. "It's the first installment of what I owe you. It's a small amount, but I'm committed to paying you back bit by bit until I return the full 10,000, James said after a thoughtful pause. He simply gazed at her, his expression a mystery, and then, with a hopeful sigh, he picked up the envelope and, without even opening it, placed it right back in front of her. "No." Emily blinked. "What do?" "No. I mean no," he repeated, crossing his arms. "It wasn't just Emily. You don't have to pay me back." Her jaw tightened. "I do. I can't just take money from you. Someone, particularly someone I barely know." James let out a breath and shook his head. "I decided to give it to Owen since he really needed it, and I knew you would appreciate that too. That's all there is to it." Emily clenched her fists, determined to overcome his challenges. An effortless dismissal of something that meant so much to her. "I don't want to feel like I owe you, James." He observed her with curiosity. A moment passed, and he leaned forward slightly. "Don't," he said quietly. "I didn't do it. I did it because your son was willing to give up the one thing he treasured most just to help. Assist you. That kind of love is truly special, and I admired it." Emily sensed her determination. Waver she had been anticipating some pushback, but not this, not a lack of understanding, not. Warmth filled her as she took a deep breath. "Still, I believe there's a better way to address this," James sighed again, but this time there was a twinkle of amusement in his expression. "Okay," he said. Straightening, she suggested. "Let's make a deal." She frowned and asked, "What kind of deal?" "Let's make sure you pay me back. We can start with something small." He picked up his phone from his desk and tapped a few buttons. "How about I treat you to something nice?" At an Owen dinner, Emily blinked and said, "Yes." He responded effortlessly. "Do you want to do something in return for me? Then let me take you both out." She opened her mouth to argue, but he held up a hand before she could think of it this way. "You're embracing support. You're simply enjoying dinner with someone special." And the term special caught her by surprise. It felt. It's intriguing to hear from someone like James Reeves, a person so distant from her world. And yet there's something captivating about the way she expressed that it made everything feel genuine. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded and said, "All right, one dinner at James's." Lips curved into the faintest smile. One delightful dinner that evening. Emily and Owen met James at a charming Italian restaurant. A delightful surprise away from the flashy hotspots she had anticipated someone like him to enjoy. The moment they walked in, Owen's eyes sparkled at the sight of the massive wood-fired pizza oven. And Emily couldn't help but feel the excitement in the air. Couldn't help but chuckle as he enthusiastically shared with James all about his favorite toppings. Her surprise listened with genuine interest, unlike the polite, distracted manner that adults often used with kids. By the time the food arrived, Owen was already halfway through sharing his excitement about his favorite superheroes, and Emily discovered herself watching them. Something warm settling in her chest for the first time in what felt like forever. She was not alone, focusing on bills or medicine. She was able to set aside the weight of responsibility that could easily feel overwhelming. She was fully present, savoring the moment in the company of James. All his wealth and power appeared just as comfortable as she felt at one point as Owen. With determination, James met her gaze and said, "You know, you should allow yourself. Embrace kindness every now and then." Emily let out a gentle laugh, saying, "I'm not quite accustomed to it." James tilted his head, suggesting a possibility. She felt a spark of curiosity about how to respond. That's so she didn't. But as the night went on, she laughed more than she had in a long time. Years passed as Owen leaned sleepily against her shoulder on the drive home, and she felt a sense of possibility that somehow this man was transforming into something greater than just a brief moment of kindness in their lives. And for the first time James was pleasantly surprised to find himself seeing them again so soon after dinner. He was looking forward to returning to his usual routine, the endless meetings, the high-stakes deals, and the carefully structured plans. Life he had built for himself, and something had shifted that night. Perhaps it was the way Emily had finally let loose, sharing laughter over plates of pizza, or how Owen had nearly drifted off mid-sentence, feeling completely at ease in James's presence. Or perhaps it was the wonderful moment when, after years, James felt at ease as he found himself driving back to their neighborhood a few days later. He told himself it was just a casual visit, nothing more. After all, he had technically bought the toy car, and he was excited to check in on its previous owner. That was the reason When Emily opened the door, she was pleasantly surprised to see him standing there with a small bag in his hand. "I thought, this is Owen." He held up the bag and said, "You might want this back." Emily frowned and asked, "What is it, James?" With a playful smirk, she suggested he ask him. She shot him a knowing look, but welcomed him in regardless, calling out cheerfully. For Owen, the boy came barreling out of his room, skidding to a stop when he saw James. "You came back." Owen grinned. "You bring snacks?" James chuckled. "Not this time, but I did bring something special for you." He handed over the bag, and Owen pulled out the contents, a nearly identical toy car. But this one was brand new and gleaming. Red and uncuffed, his eyes widened in amazement. "Whoa." He held it up next to his old one. "Different stock. It looks just like mine, but with a touch of elegance." James leaned against the couch, enjoying the moment. "It seems like your original card has earned a well-deserved break after all those years. Now you have a special one for those memorable occasions." Owen grinned like those who own a luxurious car they take out for special occasions. James. With a playful smirk, Emily stood nearby, arms folded, as if to say, "You didn't have to do that." That Jane shrugged. "I wanted to, and that was the start of something wonderful." Many of them were pleasantly surprised that James began visiting more frequently, always with a reason to share. Small gestures like bringing Owen a book he thought he'd enjoy and dropping off takeout after a long day show how much he cares, claiming he just happened to be in the area. In the neighborhood, he always knew the perfect balance, never overstaying or pushing, yet his presence brought a wonderful warmth. Owen was always excited to see him, and Emily felt right at home with the whole situation. Had begun to feel more at ease every time he showed up. One Saturday afternoon, James found himself in the park, with him tossing a baseball back and forth with Owen, while Emily sat on a bench watching with a cheerful expression. Owen was confident that with a bit more practice, James would surely improve after that close call with a fast one. "Throw. You know," Emily called out, smirking. "For someone who runs an empire, you're quite something." "Not the best at catching." But James effortlessly caught the next ball and tossed it back to Owen. "I delegate. That's what it's all about." Owen laughed, and that's a clever way of saying you let others take on the tough tasks. James raised an eyebrow. "You're definitely smarter than many of my board members." Emily shook her head, but there was joy in her eyes after the game. They sat on a picnic blanket finishing the sandwiches. Emily had packed Owen full and content, flopped happily. He settled onto his back and gazed up at the sky. "This is nice," he murmured, his voice soft and dreamy. "It's like having a dad." And in that moment, Emily felt a spark of determination as she stiffened her fingers. As the blanket tightened around the edge, James felt a sudden jolt in his chest. But before either of them, Owen rolled over onto his side, propping himself up on one elbow, and with a grin, he added almost playfully, "James, you're not exactly my dad, but sort of," Emily sighed. Covering her face, Owen. James, to her surprise, didn't seem offended at all. In fact, he was laughing, his deep chuckle rumbling through the air. He mused with a sense of wonder. "That's a new one." Owen nodded, and yeah, you're not as strict as a real dad would be, but that's okay. You do amazing things and spend time with us, so it's like having a dad around. Emily let out a breath of relief. Rubbing her temples, she said, "You can't just go around saying things like that, buddy." "Why?" Owen looked at her with genuine curiosity. "I believe Mr. James has a fondness for us, James." Still amused, she glanced at Emily. "He's not wrong." She shot him a look, flustered but intrigued. He could see the hint of a smile she was trying to fight, and from that day on, Owen's nickname for him stuck. James didn't mind at all. He gently corrected him, not pushing it away because, honestly, he didn't mind at all. The more time he spent with them, the more he wanted to stay. He had spent years in boardrooms surrounded by luxury, wealth, and individuals who viewed him merely as a business opportunity. But here in Emily's cozy apartment with Owen's toys playfully spread across the floor and the delightful aroma of home-cooked meals wafting through the air, felt something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. Emily still hesitated sometimes, still looked at him with cautious eyes when she thought he wasn't paying attention. She was learning to navigate her interactions with others, sticking around. James could see that she was starting to get used to him a little. One lovely evening, as they tidied up after dinner, she finally expressed what had been on her mind. "It's been on her mind. You really don't have to keep doing this, you know." James is drying a plate. Caught a glimpse of her being here, spending time with us. "You're a busy person." James met her gaze, searching for something. "Why are you still here?" he asked. She set the plate down and leaned against the counter. "Do you want me to stop?" she asked, opening her mouth and then closing it again. Looking at James, he tilted his head, unsure. Emily sighed and rubbed her forehead, expressing her thoughts. James took a moment to consider her words before responding, wanting to ensure that Owen remains open to possibilities, even if this is just a temporary situation. "There are things I prefer not to do, Emily, but if I'm here, it's because I truly want to be." Swallowed, looking away. "That's what gives me pause." He didn't push, he simply let her be. Sit with it because despite her efforts to maintain her walls and her attempts to persuade herself, he was just a passing chapter in their story, and he wasn't going anywhere. James Reeves had spent years building a life. He was beginning to see that with Emily and Owen, there was a wonderful potential for growth and new possibilities. Sometimes the most wonderful things come unexpectedly, and that excited him more than anything else. James had always been cautious. He had dedicated his life to weighing risks, making sure he never invested too much of himself into everything that could be taken away from business was manageable, numbers were consistent, and people could be guided. With the right incentives, emotions and relationships can lead to exciting possibilities. In a surprising turn of events, he had welcomed Emily and Owen into his life, effortlessly breaking down the barriers he had built. Built so carefully for weeks, he had reassured himself it was just a small thing that he was being kind, looking out for Owen because he admired the boy's determination. And the truth had been, it was evident the first time he found himself thinking about Emily long after he had left her apartment. As he found himself glancing at his phone, eagerly anticipating a message that never arrived, it was clear that he began to cancel meetings to enjoy an extra hour with them at their cozy kitchen table, soaking in every moment of conversation. Owen talked about superheroes while Emily tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled. And that was the challenge he faced. James had loved once before, and though he had trusted, he found himself feeling shattered. Yet, there's always hope for new beginnings. He reassured himself that he wouldn't let it happen again, so he took a step back. It began with small, subtle excuses and an unexpected work commitment. James had a late-night meeting that prevented him from joining them for dinner, and while Emily didn't question it at first, she remained hopeful for the next opportunity to share a meal together. Saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes when he canceled their plans at the last minute. He sensed the hesitation in Her voice when he called to reschedule was filled with possibility, and he didn't stop because he knew that if he let go, there would be more chances ahead. Himself get any closer, he wouldn't survive it. When she left, Emily noticed the shift. Even if James thought she wouldn't, she had learned to recognize the signs of someone pulling away. She had experienced it repeatedly, her whole life shaped by the comings and goings of others, including her father who had walked away out before she was old enough to remember the man who had given her out and yet had never truly embraced the role of a father. Friends who had disappeared when things got too hard. She had learned not to expect people to stay, but James had been a wonderful exception. Different, he had made her feel, even if just for a moment, that perhaps she wasn't alone. That perhaps for once someone recognized her not as a burden, not as a woman striving to hold her life together, but as someone truly special. It was worth showing up for, and now he was moving on, just like many others have before. She chose not to ask him about it and didn't pursue him. If there was one thing, she chose not to beg someone to stay, so she stepped back from the dinners. Transformed into brief exchanges, the joyful laughter they once enjoyed evolved into cautious niceties. One evening, James canceled their plans without suggesting a reschedule, and Emily interpreted that as a clear answer. She had been anticipating that Owen would notice before she even had to say anything. He was young, but he was sharp, and he had always been able to read her in a way that made her feel both proud and heartbroken. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked quietly one night as she tucked him into bed. Emily's heart clenched. "Of course not, baby. But I wonder why James isn't coming around anymore." She managed to smile brightly. Owen is smoothing his hair, focused, and ready to tackle all the important things on his plate. Emily felt a tightness in her throat as she realized how much they meant to him. Owen remained silent, but there was a sense of hope in the air. However, the following afternoon when school ended, he was ready with a plan that James hadn't considered, looking forward to seeing Owen standing outside his office building. He had just wrapped up a meeting and was stepping out of the sleek. As he approached the glass doors, he noticed the boy sitting on a bench near the entrance, legs swinging. Owen felt a rush of emotions in his heart. The boy looked up and grinned, yet there was a hint of something deeper, a flicker of disappointment that James sensed. Stomach twist. "You're busy, Owen?" James ran a hand through his hair. No, but..." "Owen, how did you get here?" "Bus?" Owen said matter-of-factly. "Mom doesn't know she'd..." James exhaled sharply, and with a smile, he said, "Yeah, I imagined she would." He crouched in front. Owen is doing his best to maintain a steady voice, reminding you that exploring alone isn't the best option. "Hey buddy, it's not safe." Owen shrugged, swinging his legs. "I just had to ask you." James hesitated for a moment. "Okay, what is it?" Owen tilted his head, studying him with curiosity, a way that showed remarkable insight for a child his age. "It's interesting to see how he perceives things, isn't it?" "Why are you making my mom?" James felt the question hit him unexpectedly, but he opened his mouth then. She closed it. "I'm not," Owen said, cutting him off. "She won't say it, but I." "It seems like she's been a bit quiet lately. She smiles, but it feels like it's not her genuine smile. It's more of a mask she wears. When she doesn't want me to worry." James exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Owen, you like her, don't you?" asked, his tone so direct that James almost chuckled. He exhaled slowly, feeling a sense of lightness. Owen's brow furrowed as he wondered why James was staring at him, feeling a sense of curiosity about how to proceed. Describe the years filled with challenges and the lessons learned from betrayal, along with the apprehension that accompanied deep care. Yet seeing Owen so open and genuine, trusting he understood that honesty was essential because caring deeply for someone can bring both joy and pain. James expressed softly that he didn't want to cause any pain to your mom or you, and Owen turned his head, "But you're making her stronger by leaving." James took a deep breath, and Owen released a, "It sounds like he's carrying a weight that doesn't quite match his years. I may not have all the answers about adult life, but I do know that when people truly enjoy each other's company, and they should always be there for one another. If you're feeling scared, that's just a misunderstanding. Because my mom is absolutely amazing. She's the kind of person who brings joy to everyone around her. When you make her happy, she spreads that happiness right back to you." "Happy? Why would you stop coming over?" James had no answer. Owen hopped off the With the bench standing in front of him, he thought it might be a good idea to head home before she discovers he was here. But he encouraged James to make the necessary changes. Watch as the boy walked away. The weight of his words pressing down on him like a stone. He had spent his entire life believing that distance was the best way to safeguard himself, thinking that if he never allowed himself to get too close, he could. It's important to learn from our experiences, and while Owen had a point, it's clear that both Emily and he are feeling the weight of their emotions. For the first time in a long time, James realized he was scared, but he felt a spark of hope. Perhaps it was finally time to pause and reflect. James spent the night moving around, contemplating his next steps. In the penthouse, gazing out at the vibrant city skyline, there was a sense of hope as thoughts swirled around, with Owen's words echoing in a positive rhythm. In his mind, refusing to fade, he believed that by leaving, he was causing her pain. But the boy had been. Indeed, he had dedicated his whole life to evading the concept of love, attachment, or anything that could bring him closer to connection. Him vulnerable, and now for the first time he was exploring the possibility of finding new strength within himself, because this time walking away hadn't brought him safety. Instead, it had opened up a space for new possibilities. Thought of Emily, her quiet strength, the way she embraced the challenges of the world with grace. He remembered the way she smiled when she thought no one was watching, the gentle way she spoke to Owen as she tucked him in. As he lay awake at night, he reflected on how she had never once asked for anything from him, not even after he had changed her. Life with a single check was truly unique. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, and that made it all the more special. Impressed by his wealth, she wasn't interested in his power. She had always desired one thing for the people she cared about: love to be okay, and James knew with a clarity that filled him with excitement that he loved. The realization struck him with intensity, leaving him momentarily breathless. He had finally allowed himself. He had always believed it was there, quietly growing, patiently waiting for him to find the courage to embrace it. And now, standing there in his perfectly cool apartment, he realized something else too. If he didn't take action, he knew that if he didn't fight for this, it would be a missed opportunity he would always think about. He made a call, and by morning, he was standing outside a high-end collector's showroom, eagerly waiting for the doors to open. The man who owned the collection specialized in rare items, treasures that most people wouldn't even consider twice. And collectors eagerly invested small fortunes to own what James had heard about. One of his business acquaintances mentioned that he had a knack for sentimentality. And that was precisely what James was excitedly searching for: the toy car that was beautifully displayed behind glass, framed like a treasure. It was a remarkable piece of art, almost identical to Owen's, same make, same model, just perfect. In perfect condition, it was manufactured decades ago as part of a limited run, making it truly valuable among enthusiasts. And James focused on what it. The collector had named his price, and James left without hesitation. The car was in his hands. Emily was pleasantly surprised to see James again. Not after the way he had pulled away after she had bravely accepted that whatever they had been building had slipped through her fingers, but she focused on the positive side of things. She appreciated the kindness he had shown her, and she recognized how much Owen had transformed their lives in ways she could never fully explain, but in the end, he had still walked away. And she had shared herself. She wouldn't spend time grieving something that was never truly hers to begin with. So, when there was a knock at the door that evening, she opened it without expecting anything. And then she froze. James stood there looking like a man on the brink of a transformative moment. His suit was slightly rumpled as if he had been running. His hands ran through his hair, and his expression was a captivating mix of intensity and curiosity. With a sense of anticipation, he held a small, carefully wrapped box in his hands for a long moment. Neither of them spoke. And then quietly James asked, "Can I come in?" Emily swallowed hard. Her heart was pounding, and despite her better judgment, she stepped aside for Owen. Hearing the movement, he rushed in from the other room, and the moment he saw James, his face lit up. "You came back." James gave him a small smile. "Yeah, buddy, I did." He crouched down, holding out the box. "I brought you something." Owen's eyes sparkled with excitement as he took it, unwrapping with a thrill that radiates joy, reminiscent of a child's delight upon discovering a toy car in their hands. His mouth fell open in disbelief. "No way." He breathed. "It's just like mine." James nodded. "I found it." It was in a collector shop, and I thought you might want it. Owen turned the car over in his hands. Hans then looked up at James, his expression serious. But why, James? He paused, looking at Emily before responding, as some things are truly worth cherishing. A change occurred in the air. Emily sensed it as a challenge. A moment that felt significant and full of potential. Disregard the uncertainty of whether it was the way James was looking at her or the way her heart was racing with excitement, making it hard to concentrate. Owen, still gazing at the toy, suddenly broke into a grin. This is the best. What an exciting moment. I'm going to place it right next to my other one. He turned and dashed off toward his room, leaving the two adults behind. Standing there in a heavy silence, James exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. He admitted with a hint of vulnerability. I'm still figuring out how to be the person who stays. Emily's throat tightened. Then, why are you here? He truly looked at her, and for the first time, his expression was filled with certainty because he said quietly to Owen, I can't walk away from you, and took a step forward. Closer, his voice low but steady. I reminded myself that I could do this, that I didn't deserve to, but being away from you felt like a challenge I was willing to face, and I know I've had a great track record with trust. And I promise you, I'm not running anymore, Emily's. Her eyes burned, and she yearned to believe him, to allow herself to embrace that possibility. Time held the potential for change. Yet the fear lingered, along with the doubt and the voice in her head that had always offered caution. Despite the hesitation, James must have sensed it because he reached out gently, taking her hands in his. I don't. He expressed his deep care for you, Emily. He said he needs you and he needs this, and if you ask me to walk away right now, I will. But I believe there's still a part of you that wants me to stay. To stay, I promise I will spend every day showing you that I'm here for the long haul. Emily let out a shaky breath. And then, in a moment of spontaneity and courage, she stepped forward and pressed her lips to. James inhaled sharply, surprised, but then his hands found their way to her waist, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss as if he had been waiting for this moment forever. When they finally pulled apart, he rested, his forehead against hers. He exhaled a soft laugh. So, I'm guessing that means you want me to stay? Emily smiled, and for the first time in ages, it felt genuine. Yes, she softly said. I do. And Emily had. She has always envisioned love as something uncomplicated, a serene and consistent presence that brings a sense of belonging. Yet, being with James was anything but simple. It was intense and full of overwhelming emotions, sometimes challenging, but it was genuine, and after years of perseverance, she finally allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, she didn't have to do it alone anymore. James had stayed. True to his word, he hadn't pulled away again. He had been there every morning with coffee in hand, always ready to brighten the day. Every weekend, they enjoyed evenings filled with stories about his day, always finding a reason to take Owen out for an adventure. They had truly embraced the joy of exploration together, into something that felt like a routine, something warm and comfortable, something Emily had always dreamed of but never thought possible. Comfort was a delicate thing, and it didn't take long for reality to make its presence known, starting with small encounters with strangers, gazing a bit longer when they were out together, soft murmurs in the background of restaurants, a few intrigued glances. When James picked Owen up from school, it was an exciting moment, but then the headlines came, and Emily had something to share. She always focused on her role as a single mom, pouring her heart into providing for her son, never imagining the impact she could have on the world. A wonderful life. Especially when a photographer captured a delightful candid shot of her and James walking out of a bookstore, fingers loosely intertwined. A new chapter began as billionaire James Reeves made his remarkable entrance. With a captivating mystery, this romance unfolds as a struggling single mom transforms into the girlfriend of a billionaire, featuring the enchanting Emily Harper James. Reeves's new love interest seems to be captivated by his fortune. Emily, who had never paid much attention to tabloids before, is now intrigued by the unfolding story. She found herself in the spotlight, her face featured on gossip websites, sparking a whirlwind of speculation about her identity. Was what she desired. Wondering why someone like James would choose to be with someone like her. She encouraged herself to let go, reminding herself that the views of others held no weight. Yet it felt so challenging to truly believe it. Overlook the way people gazed, the way whispers trailed her every step, the way the mothers at Owen's school began to see her in a new light, as if she were a fascinating subject to explore, analyze, and understand. And most importantly, James began to think that perhaps they had a point, and he noticed it almost right away. One evening after dinner, as they sat together in her living room, Emily was happily scrolling through her phone. He reached over and gently took it from her hands. She looked up at him with a bright smile. Surprised, she paused, putting the book down gently. "That's not for you," he said softly, and Emily leaned back, taking a deep breath. Against the couch. "I'm trying." He studied her, something intriguing in his gaze. Expression, yet she paused, considering that perhaps they have a point. His brows furrowed in thought. She bit her lip and looked away, pondering our situation and how we might not seem to fit together. James's jaw tightened. Emily said, "I mean, look at us, James." She interrupted, "You're you, and I'm." She let out a light laugh, shaking her head. "I'm just a woman who was selling." James gazed at her for a long moment as she admired her kid's toy car at the flea market. Setting his glass down with deliberate care, he said, "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Talk like that. You're more than enough." His voice was firm yet gentle, the kind of tone that inspired confidence. "There's definitely a chance for discussion here. It seems like you might think I'm doing you a favor by being with you, but have you considered how much you've contributed?" Emily blinked, pleasantly surprised, as James leaned closer. His gaze filled with intensity. "Before you, my life was predictable, structured, and controlled. I believed that was the way it should be, what I wanted. And then you and Owen came in like a whirlwind, bringing a rush of excitement that turned everything upside down. But, for the first time, I enjoy the thrill of uncertainty. I appreciate not knowing what comes next, and I truly like that feeling." Returning to a place that truly felt like home, Emily took a deep breath. "You're not just any woman I happen to meet, Emily. You are truly the best. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm not concerned about the opinions of reporters or bored housewives on the internet about it." She let out a shaky breath. "But I know there's a place for me in your world, James." With a gentle smile, "Perhaps it's time for me to step into your world and make it my own." She let out a breathless laugh, shaking her head. "You're impossible." "I'm serious." He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I truly value the moments we share. I focus on what truly matters. Us, you and Owen. That's what counts to me. Going anywhere, and somehow that was enough." The media storm didn't stop. But it was wonderful how James shielded her from the worst of it, with his team ensuring that nothing crossed their path. The line into harassment faded away as the whispers became less significant when she discovered, for the first time, that she had someone by her side, standing beside her, eager to defend what they cherished on that beautiful afternoon. Everything transformed once more. Emily had just picked Owen up from school when a reporter, one bolder than the rest, approached them. As Emily approached with the microphone in hand, she felt a surge of anticipation, ready to move forward, but before she could express anything, Owen spoke up. "You know, Mr. James is already part of our team. Family, right?" The reporter blinked. "Oh," Owen nodded with a sense of understanding, as if it was the, "It's so clear that he loves my mom. And I believe that shows how much he cares. Loves me too. So he's kind of like my almost dad, and I believe he's going to be my real dad one day." Emily's breath caught in her throat as the reporter, clearly delighted by the unexpected moment, chuckled Owen with a beaming smile. "Absolutely." The clip went viral in no time, and James Reeves is already stepping into that father figure role. Young boys' words warm hearts everywhere. A single mom and a billionaire share more than just a fling, and this time, the headlines shine bright. Didn't bother Emily because for the first time they had gotten something right. James was someone special. Throughout their lives, he was already family. The world had transformed so much in just a few short months. The whispers had transformed into a gentle background melody. The screw of their relationship evolving into just another chapter in the media cycle. What had once felt exhilarating and what once seemed impossible now felt completely normal. James was coming over for dinner, and Owen rushed to greet him the moment he walked through the door. Emily was excited too. With newfound confidence, she reached for his hand, embracing the belief she had held for so long. That love was just a moment that others were fortunate to hold on to while she was on her own journey. With only the pieces, James had stayed, unwavering despite her doubts and the many times she had faltered. She encouraged herself to see this as a temporary situation. He had never once given her a reason to doubt his commitment. Anywhere and now as she sat beside him in his car enjoying the familiar streets. As she passed by, she realized that she had never been more at peace. "Where are we headed next?" she asked, glancing over at him, who smirked while keeping his eyes on the road. You'll see Owen buckled into the back seat was practically bouncing with excitement. "There's so much excitement, I know. But I'm not supposed to share this with you," he said with a grin. Emily raised a brow. "Oh, so you're sharing little mysteries with me now?" Owen exclaimed. With great enthusiasm, "Mr. James made me promise it would be a surprise," and Emily playfully shook her head. Amused, yet she held back. She had faith in James, a deep trust that she had. She had never trusted anyone before. And that realization was still something she was embracing when James finally. As Emily pulled into the parking lot, her breath caught in her throat, filled with excitement at the flea market. The place where it had all begun. Where Owen had stood with his tiny toy car and his determined heart, unknowingly setting everything in motion, she turned to James, her heart racing with excitement. "Why are we here?" Instead of answering, he stepped out of the car. Owen jumped out of right after him was filled with his barely contained excitement. Emily felt a delightful flutter of excitement in her stomach as James took her hand and guided her toward the same spot where she and Owen had once stood with a mix of determination and bright expectations. And then, from his pocket, James pulled out something small, a toy car. Emily's breath caught in excitement. It was the car, Owen's cherished old toy, the one he had sold. That day, without a doubt, the one that transformed everything. She gazed up at James, her eyes already glistening with tears of hope. "How did you track it down?" James said softly. "It took a while, but it turns out it passed through a couple of hands before I found it." He turned the car over in his palm, his fingers brushing the faded. "I had to retrieve the paint because this car sparked everything for me and opened up so many possibilities." "To you," Emily swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. James slowly knelt down on one knee, still holding the toy car in his hands. Owen let out an enthusiastic, "Oh my goodness, it's happening." Emily laughed joyfully, her eyes sparkling with tears of happiness. Pressing a hand to her mouth, James smiled up at her, his expression brimming with joy. A love so deep made her chest swell with joy as he popped open the top of the toy car, unveiling a subtle treasure within a ring, understated yet captivating, elegantly simple and elegant. "Just like her. I've spent my whole life believing that love was something to cherish from afar," James said, voice steady yet filled with emotion, "that if I allow myself to care deeply, I could find myself with nothing. And then you and Owen came along and transformed my world in the most amazing way. And in that moment, I realized I wanted to be close to you, to share this space together. Always." And Emily's vision blurred as a tear slipped down her cheek. James took a breath. "I adore you, Emily Harper. Your strength and kindness shine brightly. Your unwavering spirit is truly admirable. I appreciate how you've selflessly given so much without ever asking for anything in return. My love for Owen is immense." He glanced at the boy and then back at her, as if to say, "If you're willing to embrace this opportunity, I truly want to be a part of this family for real, forever." Owen was practically 6. With excitement, Emily exclaimed, "Yes, Mom," as she let out a shaky laugh, looking around. Between James, the ring, and the boy who had unknowingly brought them all together, and in that moment, she felt a sense of clarity and connection. There was a bright certainty in her heart. "Yes," she whispered, then louder as she dropped to her knees and threw her arms around James, filled with excitement and joy, exclaiming, "Yes, yes, yes." James exhaled a breath of relief, holding her close as the weight of everything transformed into hope. The uncertainty became a new adventure, and the fear turned into strength over the years. Loneliness melted away as Owen cheered, jumping up and down with joy. "Mr. James is my dad now." James chuckled, pulling Emily back just enough to slide the ring onto her finger. "You okay with that, buddy?" Owen grinned, nodding enthusiastically. His curls bounced with joy. "Can I still call you almost Dad sometimes, James?" With a playful smirk, "You can call me whatever you want." Owen joyfully threw himself at them, wrapping them in a warm hug. them both so tightly that Emily let out a joyful laugh, wrapping her arms around her son and the man who had somehow became her home, and just like that the life she had always hoped for was hers. A love she never thought she'd discover, a family she never imagined she could have, and all because of a little boy with a toy car and the man who had the courage to love them both. The days that followed were brimming with celebration, laughter, and a warmth that Emily had never imagined she would experience. Owen, brimming with excitement, shared the news of the proposal with everyone, his teachers, the cashier at the grocery store, and more. And even the mailman James embraced it all with a smile, playfully ruffling Owen's hair every chance he got. He joyfully declared, "My almost dad is my real dad now." The wedding was small, just close friends and a few of James's more trusted colleagues. And it was wonderful as Owen stood proudly beside them, grinning from ear to ear as they exchanged vows. James knelt down after kissing Emily, looking Owen in the eye and promising to love him like his own. Emily felt a deep certainty in her heart that their life was filled with potential. They chose a cozy home instead of a mansion, and Emily was determined to keep her job, even though James had expressed his thoughts on the matter. Didn't have to, but that was the charm of it. It wasn't about money or status or what the world believed. It was about the delightful little moments: Saturday morning pancakes, late night movies on the couch. The way James showed up at Owen's school pickup just because he wanted to be there is a beautiful reminder of love. Discovered her in the most surprising manner, yet it was genuine, powerful, and truly valuable. Every moment of uncertainty and fear. And as Emily sat in their living room one evening, she watched James and Owen race with excitement. As she watched their toy cars scattered across the coffee table, a warm realization washed over her. This was home. This was truly wonderful. And she wouldn't change a single thing. If you enjoyed this story, don't hesitate to share your thoughts. Don't forget to leave a like. It truly supports the channel. And if you're looking for more uplifting and touching stories like this one, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this one. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next story.